The room was still half asleep when the sun slipped through the curtains. The soft light painted the walls in pale gold, warming the quiet air. A clock ticked slowly in the corner, each sound marking another peaceful second. The little apartment was simple, almost plain, but in that simplicity there was comfort. A table stood by the window with 2 cups waiting to be filled. She arrived like she always did, without knocking, without calling, as if she belonged there. Her steps were light, but he heard her anyway. The sound of the door opening always made him feel something, calm, safe, and a little nervous all at once. She carried a small bag of groceries in her hand. It was not much, only bread, some fruit, and milk. But the way she brought them every morning made the place feel alive. She smiled as she placed them on the table, her voice soft. "You never remember breakfast, do you?" He laughed, rubbing his eyes. His hair was messy, his shirt loose, but there was warmth in his laugh. "That's why you're here, isn't it?" The morning began like this most days, with gentle teasing and simple routines. She would make the coffee while he set the cups. She knew exactly how he liked it. Dark, but not too bitter. He never had to tell her anymore. The sound of spoons clinking against porcelain filled the air, mixing with the distant hum of the city outside. A car passed now and then, but it was faint, like background music to their quiet world. He watched her move around the kitchen, familiar yet new every time. She wasn't dressed up, just a plain shirt and jeans, hair tied back carelessly. But there was something about her presence that made everything softer. The room seemed warmer when she was inside. They sat at the table, shoulders brushing lightly, as they leaned in to talk. The space was small, so closeness was natural. Still, every time their arms touched, he felt a little spark inside his chest. He hid it well with smiles and jokes, but the spark never left. "Did you sleep well?" she asked, sipping her coffee. "Well enough," he answered. "Though I think your voice is better than any alarm clock." She rolled her eyes, but her smile gave her away. "You're terrible." And yet she stayed close. The words between them were simple, ordinary even. They spoke about nothing important: the weather, a book she was reading, the way the neighbor's dog barked too much at night. But behind the ordinary words, there was something unspoken, something neither of them dared to name. The morning stretched slowly, like it wanted to stay. Every small sound became a part of their rhythm. The spoon tapping, the quiet laugh, the pause between sentences, all of it wove together into something almost tender. He noticed the way she tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, the way her eyes brightened when she talked about something she loved. She noticed the way he leaned forward to listen, the way he always let her finish even if he had something to say. There was comfort between them, but also a quiet pull, like a string connecting 2 hearts too shy to admit it. She leaned back in her chair, stretching her arms. The sunlight caught her face, making her look softer, almost glowing. He tried not to stare, but he did anyway, quickly looking away when she glanced back. His cheeks grew warm, though he told himself it was just the coffee. The silence that followed was not empty. It was filled with meaning. They both felt it, but neither spoke of it. Instead, she reached for the bread, breaking it in half and sliding a piece across the table to him. "Eat," she said simply. He smiled, taking it. "Yes, ma'am." They laughed again, the kind of laugh that eased everything, but under the laughter was something heavier. It was in the way their eyes lingered too long, in the way their voices softened without reason. Outside, the day was beginning, but inside, time seemed slower. The apartment was small, the table old, the cups mismatched. But none of that mattered. What mattered was the warmth that filled the space, the feeling of being seen, of being cared for. He thought about how strange it was. She was just a friend. That was what everyone thought. That was what they told themselves. But mornings like this made him wonder if there was more hidden between the lines of their friendship. As the clock ticked on, he found himself memorizing the moment, the sound of her laugh, the glow of sunlight on her face, the comfort of her presence. It was nothing unusual, nothing dramatic, and yet to him, it felt like everything. When she looked at him again, their eyes met, and for a heartbeat the world outside disappeared. The morning was quiet, but inside that quiet, something new was growing, fragile and unspoken. The kettle whistled softly, steam rising in the small kitchen. The morning had settled into its own rhythm, a rhythm they both knew well. He leaned against the counter, arms folded, watching her move. She knew where everything was: the cups, the sugar, the old jar of coffee tucked behind the salt. She had moved through his home so many times that it no longer felt like his alone. There was comfort in this routine, the kind of comfort that builds slowly, day after day. She poured the coffee carefully, the sound of liquid filling the cups, breaking the silence. The smell drifted through the air, warm and rich, and it wrapped around them like a blanket. He handed her the spoon without her asking. She gave a small nod, her smile quiet but full of meaning. These tiny gestures spoke louder than words. They had done this so many times that their movements almost mirrored each other, like a dance practiced in secret. "Sugar?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "Just a little," she replied, her voice gentle. He added exactly 2 spoons, not 1 grain more, not 1 less. She watched him, amused. "You remember everything, don't you?" "Only the important things," he said. His tone was playful, but his eyes held something deeper. They carried the cups to the table. The chairs scraped softly against the floor, the sound small but grounding. Outside, the world was waking up, cars passing, distant voices in the street, but here in this room time felt slower, softer. They sat close again, the space between them almost nothing. Her arm brushed his when she reached for her cup, and he felt a flicker inside, sharp and warm. He pretended not to notice, though his heart betrayed him, beating louder than before. "Do you ever think about leaving the city?" she asked suddenly. The question surprised him. He looked at her, trying to read her face. "Sometimes," he admitted. "Why? Do you?" She nodded, staring at the coffee in her hands. "Yes. Sometimes I dream about quiet places, a small town, somewhere people actually look at the sky." He smiled faintly. "You'd get bored in a week." She laughed, shaking her head. "Maybe, but still, it's nice to think about." Their conversation drifted like that, light but layered. They spoke of things that seemed ordinary, but hidden in their words was a longing neither of them named. Each question felt heavier than it sounded, each answer carrying more than it revealed. He listened closely, not just to what she said, but how she said it. The pauses, the softness, the way her voice lowered when she spoke of dreams. He wanted to ask her more, to know the thoughts she never spoke aloud. But the words stayed trapped in his chest, caught between fear and desire. She too was aware of the silence that hung between sentences. It was not awkward. It was charged, alive. Sometimes silence speaks louder than sound, and in their silence there was comfort, but also an ache neither of them wanted to disturb. The sunlight shifted through the curtains, falling across her face. She leaned back in her chair, tilting, her head toward the light. For a moment she closed her eyes. He stared longer than he should have, memorizing the curve of her smile, the way the light kissed her skin. She opened her eyes suddenly and caught him looking. He turned away quickly, but she laughed, soft and knowing. "You always look like you're hiding something," she teased. "I'm not hiding anything," he replied too quickly. She leaned in, narrowing her eyes playfully. "Liar." The word hung in the air, light on her tongue but heavy in his chest. He wanted to answer, to turn her teasing into truth, but he swallowed the thought. Instead, he laughed, shaking his head. "You're impossible." She grinned, sipping her coffee, but her gaze lingered on him a little longer than before. The room felt different now. The comfort was still there, but under it ran something stronger, something that made the air feel heavier. Every glance was longer, every silence sharper. She reached across the table for the fruit she had brought earlier. Her sleeve brushed against his hand, and the touch was brief, accidental, but it left his skin burning. She did not move away quickly, nor did he. The moment stretched, small but endless, until finally she pulled back with a smile too calm to be casual. He exhaled slowly, realizing he had been holding his breath. The clock ticked on. The world outside moved fast, but inside the morning stretched as though it wanted to keep them in this bubble of almost confession. Sometimes, she said quietly, her voice softer than before, I think mornings like this mean more than people realize. He looked at her, searching for her meaning. Her eyes met his, steady, unblinking. There was no joke in her tone, no teasing in her smile, only truth, wrapped in gentleness. He wanted to answer, but words felt small compared to what he felt. So instead he nodded, his hand tightening around his cup, as if it could steady him. The moment passed, but it left a mark. The comfort between them was no longer simple. It had grown into something fragile, something they both felt but would not yet name. The morning carried on, familiar as always, but now every sip of coffee, every shared glance, every brush of skin seemed to hold new weight. The comfort was still there, but now, beneath it, something deeper stirred. The morning felt settled, wrapped in a quiet rhythm when the moment came, so sudden, so ordinary, yet unforgettable. She had just finished her coffee, the cup resting half empty on the table. The air smelled faintly of roasted beans and fresh bread, mixed with the soft warmth of sunlight. He leaned back in his chair, stretching, when something small rolled from the edge of the table and fell to the floor. A spoon. It clattered against the tiles, the sound sharp in the silence. Without thinking, she pushed back her chair and bent, down to pick it up. It was the simplest action. Something she had done 1,000 times in her own kitchen. Something that should have meant nothing. But for him, in that single second, the world tilted. He caught a glimpse of her as she leaned forward, her shirt shifting just slightly, her thin bra visible through the light fabric. It wasn't meant for his eyes. It wasn't deliberate. But the sight hit him like a spark to dry wood. His chest tightened, heat rushing to his face. He looked away immediately, as if his gaze could burn. But it was too late. His cheeks were already red, his pulse too fast. He stared at the clock on the wall, at the window, anywhere but at her. When she sat back up, spoon in hand, she noticed. She noticed the way his ears flushed, the way his hand gripped the edge of the table. Her eyes lingered on him, curious, almost amused. Are you okay? She asked, her tone light but edged with knowing. He forced a laugh, trying to hide the truth. Yeah, just the coffee's a little hot. She tilted her head, unconvinced. A smile tugged at her lips, soft but teasing. You sure that's all? His throat tightened. He wanted to answer quickly, casually, but the words stuck. He could only nod, his face still warm. She placed the spoon back on the table and leaned on her elbow, watching him. Her eyes were brighter now, playful but sharp, like she was trying to peel back his silence. You know, she said softly, you blush too easily. The words landed heavier than he expected. He wanted to protest, to laugh it off, but something in her gaze stopped him. Her voice had been teasing, yes, but beneath it was something else, something deeper. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The clock ticked louder in the stillness, each second pulling the silence tighter. He glanced at her, and their eyes met. This time he didn't look away fast enough. Her gaze held his, steady and calm, but full of unspoken questions. He felt the weight of it, like she could see everything he tried so hard to hide. His blush deepened. He hated how transparent he was, yet part of him wanted her to know. She leaned back slowly, her smile softening into something more tender. Don't worry, she whispered, almost as if to herself. It's kind of sweet. The words caught him off guard. Sweet. No one had ever said that about him before. Not like this. He looked down at his cup, trying to steady himself. His hands trembled slightly, though he prayed she didn't see. The silence returned, but it was not the same as before. It was thicker now, charged, the kind of silence that made even small movements feel heavy with meaning. She broke it first, reaching for a piece of fruit from the bag. The sound of her fingers brushing the skin of an apple was louder than it should have been. She set it on the table, cutting it into slices with a small knife. "Here," she said, sliding a piece toward him. He hesitated before taking it. Their fingers touched for a fraction of a second, and though the contact was nothing, his chest thudded as if it were everything. She smiled faintly, as if she noticed. He chewed slowly, not tasting the apple, only feeling the weight of her nearness. His mind replayed that single instant, her bending down, his blush, the way she had looked at him afterward. It looped in his thoughts, impossible to shake. She seemed calmer, unbothered, though the corners of her mouth carried a secret curve. She didn't tease him further, but her silence spoke enough. The clock ticked again. A car passed outside. Somewhere in the distance a bird called, yet inside, the room felt too small, the air too thick, the closeness too sharp. He wanted to speak to break the tension, but what could he say? "I'm sorry I looked, I didn't mean to." The truth was messy, and he couldn't trust his voice not to give him away. So he stayed quiet. She, however, leaned forward, resting her chin on her hand. Her eyes didn't leave his. "You're thinking too much," she said softly. He blinked, startled. "What do you mean?" She shrugged lightly. "I can see it. You always get that look when your head is louder than your mouth." Her words disarmed him. He chuckled nervously, scratching the back of his neck. "Maybe." She smiled, and this time it wasn't teasing. It was soft, almost gentle, and it made his chest ache in a way he couldn't explain. The spoon sat on, the table between them ordinary and harmless, yet it had shifted everything. What had been a quiet morning routine was now something else, something fragile, something electric. Neither of them said it aloud, but both of them felt it. The moment had changed them. The spoon still lay on the table, but it no longer mattered. What stayed between them was not the spoon, it was the moment. The way he had looked away too quickly. The way his cheeks had flushed like fire. She noticed everything. She always did. Her eyes lingered on him now, steady and bright. He tried to distract himself, staring at the clock, at the window, at the steam still rising faintly from his coffee. But he couldn't hide what was written on his face. His skin betrayed him, glowing red against the soft light of morning. Finally, she leaned back in her chair, a quiet laugh slipping from her lips. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't sharp. It was soft, playful, and yet full of knowing. "You're blushing," she said gently. His heart stumbled. He swallowed, forcing a shaky smile. "No, I'm not." "Yes," she whispered, her tone light but certain. "You are." He rubbed the back of his neck, wishing the heat would fade. "It's just warm in here," he muttered. Her laugh deepened, low and warm. "Is that so?" She leaned forward, her elbow resting on the table, her chin in her hand. Her gaze never left his face, as if she enjoyed watching him squirm. The silence stretched, filled with the sound of the ticking clock, the faint rustle of curtains shifting with a breeze. He avoided her eyes, but he could feel them, burning, into him, playful, searching. Finally, he gave up trying to hide it. His hands dropped to the table, his fingers brushing the edge of his cup. "Fine," he said softly, almost too low to hear. "Maybe I am." Her lips curved into a smile that was different this time, not just teasing, something gentler, softer. "It suits you," she said. The words froze him. No one had ever said that before. That his blush, his awkwardness, could be anything but embarrassing. He blinked at her, surprised, unsure what to do with the sudden warmth in his chest. She sat back again, sipping her coffee. "You know," she added lightly, "you always act like you're calm, but your face tells the truth." He chuckled, nervously shaking his head. I guess I'm not as good at hiding things as I thought. That's not a bad thing, she said. Her voice was soft now, almost tender. The air between them shifted. What had been playful teasing grew into something heavier, though still unspoken. He could feel the weight of her gaze, the warmth of her words. His blush deepened, not from shame, but from something he couldn't quite name. She leaned forward again, resting both elbows on the table, closing the distance between them. What are you thinking about? She asked quietly. His heart thudded. The question felt too close, too sharp. He opened his mouth and closed it again. He wanted to say everything, that her smile made his chest ache, that her presence made the room feel alive, that he couldn't stop thinking about her. But all he managed was nothing. She arched an eyebrow, a small knowing smile tugging at her lips. Liar. The word landed heavier than before. She didn't say it as a joke this time. She said it like a truth she already knew. He looked down at his cup, tracing the rim with his finger. Maybe, he admitted softly. The silence that followed was sharp, charged. The sound of a distant car outside seemed too loud, the tick of the clock too clear. Then she laughed again, softer than before, almost like a sigh. You're impossible, she murmured, shaking her head, but her smile stayed, and her eyes, those eyes, never looked away. He risked a glance at her, and the look she gave him stopped his breath. It wasn't just amusement. It wasn't just teasing. There was something deeper there, something unspoken but undeniable. The moment held. It was fragile, like glass. One word, one movement, could shatter it. She reached for another piece of fruit, cutting it slowly. The sound of the knife against the board echoed louder than it should have. She slid a slice toward him again, their fingers brushing once more. This time she didn't pull away so quickly. He felt the warmth of her touch, brief but burning. He didn't move either. For a second it felt like time stopped, like the world outside didn't exist. Then she whispered, her voice so soft it was almost lost under the ticking clock. You don't have to hide from me. The words hit him harder than anything else. His chest tightened, his breath caught. He wanted to answer, but the words stuck in his throat. Instead, he nodded slightly, his blush deepening. And she smiled, not teasing now, but gentle. Like she had been waiting for that small truth. The morning light shifted again, filling the room with gold. The comfort between them was still there, but it was no longer simple. His blush had changed something. What had been hidden was now half revealed, like sunlight slipping through a curtain. Neither of them spoke further. They didn't need to. The blush said enough. The room carried a strange silence after her words. He still felt the heat on his cheeks, still wished he could control the way his body betrayed him. But she only smiled, calm, as if she had been expecting it all along. For a moment neither of them spoke. The only sound was the clock's steady tick and the faint hum of the city outside. Then she leaned forward, her chin in her hand, her eyes fixed on him with playful intent. You blush, she said softly, but you never admit why. He shifted in his chair, forcing a laugh. Maybe I just like the color red. She raised her eyebrows, amused. That's the best you can come up with? Hey, he said, pretending to sound offended. It was clever enough. Her laughter came, light and warm, filling the little kitchen. It wasn't loud, but it lingered, and he couldn't help but join in. Their laughter blended together, wrapping the air in something softer, something safer. Still, she didn't let him off so easily. Her smile turned sly, her voice teasing but gentle. I think you're hiding something. His chest tightened. The way she said it, the way her eyes held his, it was half a joke, half a dare. I'm not hiding anything, he replied quickly, too quickly. Liar. The word rolled off her tongue like before, but this time her tone carried more weight. He swallowed, staring at the table, then at her. And what if I am? he asked quietly. Her smile faltered for just a second, softening into something almost tender. But then she leaned back, tilting her head, eyes glinting again. Then I'll make you tell me. The challenge hung in the air. His heart thudded, but he managed a crooked smile. Good luck with that, she smirked, picking up an apple slice and holding it between her fingers. Slowly, she leaned forward, placing it just in front of his lips. Eat, she said, her voice low but playful. He hesitated. The slice hovered between them, her hand steady, her gaze locked on his. It was such a small act, but the closeness made it feel larger, charged. Finally, he leaned in, biting the slice from her fingers. Her hand lingered a moment too long before pulling back. She smiled, amused at his silence. See? You always listen. He chewed slowly, his chest burning, with more than just nerves. He tried to sound casual. Maybe I just didn't want to argue. Or maybe, she whispered, you wanted me to win. His laugh came out shaky, betraying him again. You're impossible. And you, she said, smiling, are predictable. The exchange continued like that, light teasing words layered with meanings too heavy to name. Each line was playful on the surface, but underneath ran something deeper, sharper, more intimate. He leaned forward this time, daring just a little. You think you know me that well? She tilted her head, eyes narrowing with mock seriousness. Better than you think. Then tell me what I'm thinking now, he challenged, her lips curved into a slow smile. She leaned closer, her voice dropping into a whisper. You're thinking about me. The words stopped him cold. He stared at her, his throat dry, his heart stumbling. She said it like a joke, like a tease, but her eyes stayed steady, unblinking, daring him to deny it. He laughed, but too late, too nervous. That's a bold guess. Not a guess, she said, her smile soft now. Just the truth. Silence fell again, but it wasn't empty. It was filled with the sound of their breathing, the faint creak of the chair as he shifted, the pulse pounding in his ears. She leaned back slowly, as if giving him space, but her eyes never left his. The playful energy lingered, heavy with something unspoken. Finally, she broke it with a laugh, lightening the air. Don't look so scared, she teased. I won't make you confess yet. He chuckled, shaking his head, though his chest still felt tight. You really enjoy torturing me, don't you? She grinned. Maybe a little. Their laughter rose again, soft and warm, weaving into the room like a familiar song. It felt easy, natural, but underneath the ease was something sharper, an edge neither of them wanted to dull. The clock ticked on, the sunlight shifted, the city outside moved as always, but inside, the playful exchange had turned their morning into something else. What began as teasing had become something more, a dance of words, of silences, of touches too small to name but too big to ignore. He still blushed, she still teased. But now, every smile, every glance, every word carried a double meaning. And though neither of them said it aloud, they both knew. This was no longer just comfort. This was the beginning of something they could not easily hide. The laughter faded, but it didn't vanish completely. It lingered in the corners of the room, in the warmth of the air, in the curve of her smile. Yet beneath it something else remained, something sharper, heavier, too strong to ignore. The silence that followed was not empty. It was alive. He felt it first, in the way his heart slowed and then sped again, as if trying to match a rhythm it could not find. She felt it too, in the way her eyes softened, in the way her fingers tapped against the table without meaning. Neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. The silence said more than words ever could. The clock ticked, steady and loud, each sound filling the space between them. The faint breeze shifted the curtains. Somewhere outside, a car horn sounded, but even that felt far away. Inside, the silence pressed close, like a third presence in the room. She leaned back, her arms folded, across her chest. Her gaze lingered on him, quiet, unreadable. He tried to meet her eyes, but every time he did, the weight of them made him look away. His fingers fidgeted with the handle of his cup, turning it slowly, round and round, though the coffee inside had gone cold. Finally she spoke, her voice softer than before. "Why do you always look away?" The question startled him, his hand stilled on the cup. "I don't," he said quickly, though even as he said it, he knew it was a lie. She tilted her head, her eyes steady. "Yes, you do. Every time I look at you too long, you turn away." His throat tightened. He searched for words, any excuse, but nothing came. At last he muttered, "Maybe it's because I don't want you to see too much." The admission slipped out before he could stop it. The silence thickened immediately, heavy with meaning. Her expression softened, but she didn't smile this time. Instead, she leaned forward slightly, her arms resting on the table, her face closer now. "What is it you don't want me to see?" His chest ached. The answer sat in his heart, ready to spill, but he couldn't give it voice. His lips parted, then closed again. He shook his head. "It's nothing." Her sigh was quiet, almost like a whisper of disappointment. She leaned back again, her eyes still holding his. "You always say that." The silence returned, heavier than before. The air between them grew warmer, too warm. Every sound, the tick of the clock, the creak of the chair when she shifted, the faint scrape of her fingernail against the table, felt amplified, sharp against the stillness. He dared. A glance at her again. She wasn't teasing now, wasn't laughing. Her gaze was softer, almost tender, but there was something else in it too. A longing, a question left unasked. He wanted to reach across the table, to take her hand, to tell her everything that had been locked inside him. But his body stayed, still, frozen by fear of what might happen if he did. Her fingers brushed against the fruit knife absent-mindedly, then stilled. She looked at him again, and for a long moment, neither of them blinked. Their eyes held, their silence burning, their breaths uneven. The tension was too much, too thick. He looked down suddenly, breaking the gaze. His cheeks flushed again, his heart pounding against his ribs. She gave a small, breathless laugh, not playful this time, but nervous. "You see?" she said softly. "You always run away from silence." Her words cut deep because they were true. He laughed weakly, rubbing his temple. "Maybe I don't know how to stay in it." "You should try," she whispered. The way she said it, quiet, steady, made his chest tighten again. He forced himself to look up, and this time he didn't look away. Their eyes locked, holding in that fragile balance. The silence stretched, long and unbroken. In that silence, 1,000 unspoken things passed between them. Longing, fear, tenderness, and something stronger. Something they both felt, but could not yet name. The world outside kept moving, but inside the small apartment, time slowed to a crawl. He noticed the way her lips parted slightly as if she wanted to speak but held the words back. She noticed the way his hands clenched, then relaxed, then clenched again. Every tiny movement carried weight. Every breath was charged. It was almost unbearable, yet neither of them wanted it to end. Finally, she whispered so soft it was almost lost under the ticking clock. "Do you feel it too?" The question nearly broke him. He froze, caught between confession and silence. His lips parted, but no words came. Instead, he let out a shaky breath, and that was answer enough. Her eyes softened further, her mouth curving into the faintest of smiles. She didn't push him, didn't demand words. She only let the silence speak for them both. The moment passed, but the air remained heavy. The silence was no longer a gap to be filled. It was a space that held them, fragile and electric. Neither of them said another word. They didn't need to. The silence had already said everything. The room held its breath. The silence was no longer just silence, it was heavy, trembling, stretched so thin it felt ready to break. Her question still echoed in the air. Do you feel it too? He hadn't answered with words, but his silence, his eyes, the way his chest rose too quickly, all of it spoke louder than any confession. She knew. And he knew she knew. She leaned back slightly, though her gaze stayed fixed on him. Her fingers tapped against her cup, slow and thoughtful. The coffee inside had gone cold long ago, but neither of them moved to refill it. The world had shrunk to this small table, to the space between their eyes, to the secret they now shared but could not name. Finally, she gave a quiet laugh, though it was softer than usual, almost fragile. You're terrible at hiding things, she whispered. He smiled faintly, his lips tugging upward but his heart pounding harder. Maybe, he admitted. But maybe some things aren't meant to be hidden. The words slipped out before he could stop them. His eyes widened slightly at his own daring. Her eyes did too, though, not with surprise, more with recognition, as if she had been waiting for him to say it all along. A beat passed. 2. The silence grew deeper again, holding them tightly in its grip. She lowered her gaze, staring at her hands. Her voice came quieter than ever, almost trembling. And what if you're right? His chest ached. The moment was here, hovering between them, fragile and dangerous. He wanted to reach across the table, to take her hands in his, to tell her everything. But the words felt too heavy, and his fear too strong. Instead, he whispered, "Then we don't stop here." She looked up sharply, her eyes wide. For a heartbeat, he thought he had gone too far. But then her lips curved into the faintest smile, bittersweet and trembling. "You always say things like that," she murmured, her tone half a tease but lined with something deeper. Half-finished sentences, words that hide more than they reveal. "Maybe I don't know how to say it," he confessed. Her smile faded into something tender. She leaned forward, her eyes searching his. "Then don't say it, just feel it." The words stole his breath. The air thickened around them, charged and warm. Every detail sharpened, the soft creak of her chair as she moved closer, the faint rhythm of her breathing, the way the light brushed her cheek. For a moment, it felt as if the world had slowed, giving them space for something that should not exist but did. Their hands brushed again on the table. This time, neither of them pulled away. His fingers trembled slightly, hers stilled against his. The contact was small, almost nothing, but in that moment, it felt like everything. Neither of them spoke. Their silence became its own language, their touch the unspoken confession that words had failed to carry. She looked at him and her eyes glistened faintly, not with tears, but with something softer, something too tender to name. He looked back, and for the first time he didn't look away. The room seemed to fade around them. The clock ticked on, but the sound dulled. The city outside still moved, but it felt distant, unreachable. He thought of all the mornings they had shared, all the times he had laughed with her, all the silences that had stretched too long, and he realized they had been walking toward this moment all along. She broke the stillness with a whisper, her voice low, almost shaking. "You know what happens next, don't you?" His heart stumbled. The words were simple, playful even, but they carried more weight than anything she had ever said. He nodded slowly, unable to trust his voice. She smiled then, but it was bittersweet. "We don't stop here." Her own words mirrored his, though softer, almost resigned. The silence returned, but now it was different. It wasn't sharp or heavy. It was tender, fragile, a silence that held them together instead of apart. He let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. His thumb brushed against hers lightly, barely moving, but she didn't pull away. If anything, her hand pressed, a little closer. It wasn't a confession in words. It was in the way their hands touched, in the way their eyes lingered, in the way the air between them grew warmer. It was love, or desire, or something in between. Something too big for either, of them to define, but it was there, unspoken, undeniable. The clock ticked on, reminding them that time still existed, that outside this room, the world still moved, that soon, the moment would end. But for now, they stayed where they were, suspended in silence, hearts speaking louder than voices ever could. And though neither of them said it aloud, they both knew the truth. The confession had already been made. The morning had stretched longer than usual, but time finally began to catch up with them. The sun was higher now, its light sharper through the curtains, washing the small room in pale gold. The silence between them had softened, no longer sharp with tension, but heavy with something fragile, something both of them carried now, unspoken, but real. Their hands still rested close on the table, fingers brushing now and then as if by accident, though neither pulled away. The simple touch said what their voices still refused to speak. She sighed softly, her eyes drifting toward the window. Outside, the city was fully awake. Cars moved steadily, voices echoed faintly from the street below, and life continued as though nothing had changed. But inside this room, everything had. Finally, she pulled her hand back gently as if the movement itself pained her. She picked up her empty cup, staring into it like she was searching for something more than coffee. "It's late," she murmured. He nodded, though his chest tightened at her words. "Yeah, it is." Neither of them moved right away. The weight of leaving, of breaking this fragile moment, pressed on them both. At last, she stood, her chair scraping softly against the floor. The sound felt too loud, too final. She walked toward the counter, rinsing her cup, her movements slow, thoughtful. He watched her quietly, memorizing every detail. The tilt of her head, the way her hair fell loose against her neck, the quiet steadiness in her steps. She placed the cup down and turned back to him. For a moment, her eyes lingered on him in silence. There was something in them, something tender, something aching that made his breath catch. He rose too, unsure of what to do with his hands, his voice, his heart. The room felt smaller now, as though it was holding them one last time before letting go. "You'll be fine without me for the day?" she asked lightly, her tone trying for casual, though her eyes betrayed her. He smiled faintly, though it was tinged with sadness. "I'll try." She gave a quiet laugh, but it didn't reach her eyes. The sound was softer, almost like a sigh. For a moment they stood there, facing each other in the middle of the room. The air between them was warm, filled with everything they hadn't said. Neither of them reached out, though both wanted to. Finally, she stepped toward the door. Her hand touched the knob, but she didn't turn it right away. She hesitated, glancing back at him. "You know," she said softly, her voice low and trembling just slightly. "Mornings like this, they don't happen often." His chest tightened. He wanted to say something, anything, to hold her here a little longer. But all he managed was a nod, his throat too tight for words. She smiled faintly, bittersweet and fragile. Maybe that's why they matter so much. The silence that followed was tender, heavy with unspoken things. The clock ticked again, reminding them of time, of endings, of how quickly moments slip away. She opened the door slowly. The sound of the hinges creaked softly, the faint hum of the outside world rushing in. She stepped halfway out, then paused once more, her back to him. Without turning, she whispered, "We didn't stop there, did we?" The question hung in the air, more memory than present, more promise than fact. He swallowed hard, his voice finally breaking through the weight. "No," he whispered. "We didn't." She nodded, though she still didn't turn around. Then she stepped through the doorway, her footsteps soft against the hall. The door closed with a gentle click. The sound echoed in the room, final yet tender like the last line of a song. He stood there for a long time, staring at the door, the silence pressing around him. The room felt emptier without her, quieter, colder, yet the warmth of her presence lingered, in the mismatched cups, in the chair she had left pulled out, in the faint scent of coffee still hanging in the air. He sat back down slowly, his hands resting on the table where hers had been. The memory of her touch still burned against his skin. The morning was over, but something inside him told him it would never really end. The moment, the silence, the blush, the laughter. It would stay. With him, fragile and unspoken like a secret carved into the heart. The clock ticked on. The world outside moved fast. But inside, he let himself sit with the memory, with the longing, with the sweetness and the ache all tangled together. It was not love. Not yet. Or maybe it had been love all along, too quiet to be named. Whatever it was his now. And though she had left, though the room was empty, he whispered to himself almost like a promise. We didn't stop there.